Hey, what's up, y'all? I'll wait a minute, see if some people join here. Actually, while I'm waiting for people to join, I'll go ahead and drop a little disclaimer. This is a rant completely off the cuff, so bear with me as I process through what I've got to say. Um, I'm going to talk a little bit about addiction. Like I said, disclaimer, kind of ranting here, so bear with me while I make my way through stuff. Can everybody hear me and see me? Anybody that's here, can you see and hear? Um, okay, I'm going to talk about addiction a little bit. It all stems from a thread I was involved in earlier that I kind of got blocked from. I might have got a little too real, but it made me decide to talk about addiction and offer a little bit of my insight on it based on my experience and my battles with it personally. A couple of quick stats for anybody that's not aware. This country has about 21.5 million drug addicts. Now, this is people, that's just illicit drug use. That's your heroin, your narcotics, your cocaine. That does not include alcohol or anything like that, just illicit drug use. 21.5 million people. That's a huge number. That's a huge number, friends. And addicts get a lot of flack in this society. And so I want to paint a couple of pictures for you. And a lot of you I know will relate, because if there's 21.5 million people, chances are the 4 of you that are watching right now have probably battled it or have somebody close to you that is or has. I want to paint 2 pictures for you first. One of extreme childhood trauma that I can only speak to a degree. The other being what would be seamlessly minor childhood traumas that both lead to the same vicious cycle. And why people shouldn't judge addicts. There's people, it's a disease, you know what I mean? The first picture I want to paint applies to a lot of women out there, and how women become addicts and get wrapped up in that vicious cycle. A lot of women are abused, sexually abused as children. They grow up to continue to abuse themselves, whether it be through men or whatever else. And a lot of them end up at the doorway to drug addiction as a means to cope, escape. I can't speak too much on that experience, honestly. Ladies, that's for you guys to discuss. But yeah, I mean, how can we blame anybody for ending up on drugs and alcohol after experiencing stuff like that? And society kind of bashing you for it, blaming you for it, making it your fault, family members not believing you. I mean, what else is supposed to happen? What else do you expect to turn to? You know what I mean? The other picture I want to paint for you is kind of my own, and how I ended up at that doorway. It started in a small town in Southwest Virginia. Could be any small town in rural America. 20 years ago. Started out, I graduated high school, partying with friends, just experimenting, alcohol. Got introduced to, pain pills, Lortabs, Tyloxes, Percocets. And all was, fine and dandy. And then along came a company called Purdue Pharma, who made a drug that we're all familiar with now called OxyContin. Well, back in the day, OxyContin, when it was first released on the market, was released in 2 places in the country. It was released in a small town in Maine, and it was released in this small area in Southwest Virginia, where I was at. And it blew up. It blew up, you know what I mean? And it was getting prescribed to everybody for everything, and it was just everywhere. It was everywhere. And it devastated the place. Now, like I said, I kind of ended up experimenting, you know what I mean? And at the same time, I got involved in a relationship with a woman that had the experience that I described at the beginning of this. And we got kind of wrapped up in it together. And so before we knew it, we were 2-3 years in, and woke up one morning just sick as hell, you know what I mean? And you realize then, I've got a problem here. And that was 2 years in. I was out for 20 years, y'all. 20 years out using dope and shit. And just, it happens before you realize it. And I didn't have any major childhood traumas like that I can recall. I mean, I've had some childhood traumas. You know, my folks got divorced. I didn't see my dad or talk to him for 20 years. He's deceased now, and I didn't talk to the man for 20 years. My best friend when I was growing up killed himself at school. You know what I mean? Those are childhood traumas. You know what I mean? And but I had dealt with them. I thought I had anyway. But the thing about addiction is it becomes its own vicious cycle. You know, it fuels itself. It fuels itself. Society helps fueling it without even realizing. You know what I mean? And so you start realizing that you have a problem. It's hard to escape. And what happens with addiction is it pushes us to the outer fringes of society. We start getting viewed negatively. We're the scum of the earth. And it makes it real hard to escape because we start shaming ourselves and guilting ourselves, and people just don't understand that it's a disease, you know. And after so long, you end up in a place where you have to use. You have to use to just function, to feel normal. You know what I mean? You know, you have a happiness level that's up here if you're normal, and you start using, you know, and it skyrockets you up here, but then it brings you down below that normal happiness line. So to use, you know, you use just to kind of climb back up to happy again, and then you dip down a little bit further, and then eventually you're barely making it to that normal state of happiness, and then you never make it. You just never make it there. And we bash ourselves, and we do just really messed up stuff. I've done so much messed up stuff that I'm not going to get into here, but we all do. We know we all do, and we shame and guilt ourselves about it, and society doesn't have a very kind opinion about it. And what happens is we start losing connections to our friends, our family, our coworkers, ourselves, and that's where it really becomes vicious because people just don't understand sometimes. It's a place, it's hard to understand if you've never been there. And it was just part of why I wanted to do this, because I want people perhaps that aren't addicts or haven't been there to glean some insight into what it's like. Because it's hard to escape, you know, and it's something that requires something inside of us. You know, I've been clean for some time now, after many attempts at being clean that turned out unsuccessful, because I never learned to cope with the stuff that was causing it, you know, and like I said, the addiction fueled itself. That relationship I was in fueled it. You get two addicts together and you try and get clean, it's damn near impossible, honestly, because, you know, it just takes one of you to slip, and then but, you know, I think it's fueled mostly by emotional trauma that we experience that we just don't learn how to deal with, and society doesn't. You know, there's a reason why we had, you know, military people that were over in Vietnam and whatnot. You know, we know heroin and stuff like that was huge there. They came back. Some of them stayed, you know, far out there. Others didn't use anymore once they came back here. You know, there's a reason why there's people that can have a surgery, be on pain medication for months because of it, and when they recover, they put it down and it's over. But other people continue seeking it from the doctor, and then it leads them to the street, and they're seeking it from the street. You know, and there's things inside of us that cause that we just haven't dealt with. We don't know how to deal with it. We don't know how to talk about it. And once you get so wrapped up in that addiction, nobody really wants to listen to you anymore, because you're the scum of the earth, and you have a drug problem, and all you care about is drugs. And that's just not the case, y'all. You know what I mean? Drug addicts, we have kids, you know what I mean? We love our kids. We love our kids just as, you know, the dope's not more important than our kids. It's just become such a part of it in our lives that it's so impossible to escape. And when you have a society that bashes you for it, while at the same time completely fueling it, what do you do? You know, what do you do? We've got a society where it's like, let's lock the addicts up. You know what I mean? Let's lock the addicts up and give free passes to the people that helped create them. You know what I mean? We have a system, a justice system, where the addict gets more time in jail than the pedophile that helped create him. And, that's just twisted. And there's people that get just so ridiculously rich off of addicts, you know what I mean? This town that I'm talking about in Southwest Virginia, you know what I mean? It reached a point where it's got like three or four prisons and no hospital. There's no hospital in the county. It's got 3 prisons and a regional jail. You know what I mean? Now, when they built this regional jail, and this is kind of off topic, but now that I'm on it, I have to share this point because it just illustrates how the system works with addiction and why it needs addicts. Why it needs addicts to exist, because it banks off of them. Never mind the sale and the purchase of the pharmaceuticals. You know what I mean? That's just one avenue. And Big Pharma has made hand over fist with it between the pharmaceuticals themselves and then their cure of Suboxone, Subutex, Naloxone, and all of that. They're getting rich off of that too. Never mind methadone and everything else. Quick note on methadone: don't use it to get off dope. Terrible avenue. Don't do it. That's beside the point. But this jail, when they built it, is a regional jail, serves 3 counties. And before they would build it, the board of supervisors of the counties had to guarantee this regional jail 90% occupancy. 90%, folks. 90% occupancy. That's a huge number. So they reached that 90% occupancy, and what do you think they did? They expanded the jail and made it even bigger. You know what I mean? And we pay more to house drug addicts in our judicial system and in our jail systems than we pay to educate a child in school. That is absurd. That's absurd, because it's the lack of education, it's poverty, it's all those things that fuel addiction to begin with. And it requires a drastic shift in society's perception of addicts. We cannot solve this epidemic without that drastic shift in society's perception. The individual addict, we have to reach a point in our own lives where we've had enough. Something has to happen. We have to hit bottom. And so many times we think we hit bottom and we're like, yeah, I'm going to do good. And you start climbing up and you get comfortable with it, and then you end up in situations, or you get stressed, or there's just so I could list so many reasons to get high that I could spend an hour doing it. You know what I mean? And be able to justify them all as, yeah, why wouldn't you want to escape from that? You know what I mean? But it deadens our minds, it deadens our souls, and it makes us, I've lost so many years of my life because of it. Now, I've gained a lot, I've met a lot of wonderful people, and coming out of it has just made me all the more compassionate than I was going in. But society has to change. I mean, we all, if we're honest about it, we all know an addict. We all know one. We're all affected by it. The entire society is affected by it. We have brothers, sisters, mothers, daughters, friends, coworkers. Somebody close to you is an addict. And if they're not, you're affected by the disease just by the crime and stuff that happens as a result of it, which just creates more money for the judicial system because of the crime, and it's absurd. This county in Southwest Virginia, I swear, it would completely collapse if it wasn't for the drug problem in it, because it fuels the county's coffers with fines and all kinds of stuff like that. The judges are in work, the lawyers, the substance abuse counselors, the mental health counselors, just child protective services. It's all just insane. And it's fueled by this thing of, I swear, y'all, poverty. Poverty is such the root of so many issues in this country that addiction is just one of them. I'm not going to get into all the other ones, but people need a means to escape, and we get into it sometimes and we just don't even realize it. We don't even realize, and then before you know it, 20 years has gone by and you've lost everything you've had 10 times over. You've ripped people off, you've made enemies, you've survived any countless situations, you know what I mean? And to break off topic, and it's not even off topic, you know, I'm sure y'all remember a couple of months back when was becoming this trend where the cops were taking photos of people they said overdosed in their cars. Honestly, who knows if they're overdosed? They could have been nodded out. You know what I mean? Who knows? But and posting them online, and I would see those pictures come across my newsfeed, and just all the stuff that was being said about these people, and it just broke my heart because honestly, at any time in the last 9 years since my daughter's been born, in the first 5 of them, at any time, that very well could have been my family. That very well could have been us in that car. And I don't think that necessarily makes me a bad person, because I think any of you that know me or have known me for quite some time, I'm a good person, and I care about people. You know what I mean? But that doesn't insulate me from stuff like addiction and illness, and it just doesn't. We're human. We're human. You know. And what causes this country to have addiction problems like it does versus other countries? You know, there's other countries where drug use is kind of celebratory, you know what I mean? Let's have a good time. They don't have the levels of addiction that we have, you know, but we fuel it here. We fuel it here, and they want to fuel it because they get rich off of it. Big Pharma gets rich, you know, mass incarceration, they get rich off of it, you know, and so I don't know what we do about that, you know what I mean? We have to reach out to our friends, our family members, you know, and I would encourage all of you that reach out to that addict that you know and let them know that you love them and that you support them. And when they're ready, that you're going to be there for them. Because that's what they need more than anything is love and support. They don't need bash. Man, we bash ourselves plenty. Jesus Christ, we're masters of bashing ourselves and making ourselves feel terrible. And that just gives us an excuse to go use, because we feel bad about the terrible stuff we did, you know. And to the addicts, you know, find that place that you need to find, that you've had enough, that you just don't want to do it, because it doesn't end well. I mean, it doesn't end well. Jails, institutions, and death, and as cliche as that sounds, it's just the truth. It's just the truth. I've ended up in jail. I've ended up in the institutions. I thank Great Spirit I didn't die. You know what I mean? And I'm thankful that those closest to me through it didn't die either. But that doesn't mean that there weren't people that I didn't know that died. And we all probably know somebody that has, you know, succumbed to that demon of addiction. And it's just heartbreaking, because it doesn't need to exist. It doesn't need to exist. It exists because we feel hopeless. And this country breeds hopelessness. You know, and bashing addicts, just another means to keep us all divided. It's just a means to keep us all divided. And love, y'all. We just need love. Addicts need love and support and understanding more than anything. And that's the only thing that's going to help pull them out. You know what I mean? When you see that they're struggling, throw that rope down, you know, and help pull them out, because it's a pretty deep hole. And it's real hard to make it all the way to the top, and we cannot do it by ourselves. We can start that climb by ourselves, but we're not gonna make it out of that hole by ourselves. It's impossible. You know, it requires love and support. And you know, the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's connection. You know what I mean? There was a study that was done, I can't remember when, and honestly I can't remember the guy's name. If you really want to know, check out Johan Hari, Hari, TED Talk. It's entitled, it's on my page right now, I posted it earlier. But he talks about this study that this guy did with rats back however many years ago. And, you know, he had the one set of rats, and he isolated the rat in the cage, and they added cocaine to the water supply. And the rat was isolated, one rat by himself in the cage. And they fed him and everything, and what they found was the rat quit eating, and it just drank the cocaine-laced water, and that's just how it lived, and eventually it died. They had another set of rats that was like a rat colony, and they had, you know, a huge cage, bunch of rats, you know, stuff for the rats to do and interact and play with, or, you know, whatever rats do. They did the same thing. They fed them. They laced the water with cocaine, and then they had, you know, regular water. And what they found was the rats that were in a society, in that kind of social rat setting, didn't succumb to the cocaine laced water. You know, they kind of stayed away from it, and it was fine, and they were fine, and none of them became addicted to this cocaine laced water. None of them died. But what they also found was when they took the rat that was isolated and had become addicted to it, and they placed it into that rat society, you know, in the immediate, it would go to that cocaine laced water. But what they found over time is they quit. They quit going to it, and they didn't need it anymore. And because they were interacting, and that's what it's all about. It's about interaction. That's what, I mean, that's the answer to addiction. That's the answer to everything. That's the answer to everything that plagues our society in this country, let alone the world. But it's interaction, you know, and the system has just worked so hard to divide us and keep us from interacting on an emotional, you know, heart level, that this is what happens as a result. Is you get addiction, and you get people that are addicted to drugs, you get people that gamble, you get people that drink, you get people that cut themselves, and just all these things that happen because we just need to escape this lack of interaction and loneliness that our society has created. And so, you know, reach out to people, try and connect with people, try and understand where they're coming from. Don't immediately jump to bash them for whatever their beliefs are, or what, you know, just seek to understand. You know, take a second to step back, evaluate where they're coming from, you know what I mean, and what has happened in their life to put them in their place that they're at, you know what I mean. I was fortunate, you know, I was fortunate in my addiction, you know. I have a mother who's a substance abuse counselor. She's taken the time to understand addiction. I had that love and support. But even, this is the thing, and this is how vicious it is even with that love and support and understanding, it took me 20 years to get out of it. 20 years, even with love and support. That just speaks to the sheer awesome power of addiction. And it takes society. It takes society to changing its perception, or we're not going to really have any lasting effect on the epidemic of addiction in this country. And our friends and family and coworkers are just going to keep dropping off like flies, you know. And it's going to ramp up because what's happened is they made it impossible to get the pharmaceuticals. You know what I mean? And the thing about pharmaceuticals is it was a safe drug. It was made in a lab. It was the same every time. But when they made it hard to do that, now we've had this extreme boom of heroin use in this country, and meth. You know what I mean? Now, the same town, the same area that I've been referring to in Virginia, you know, that whole time I was using, it was all narcotics. It was all narcotics. I mean, meth was around, but not like it is now, you know. And somehow the area has managed to insulate itself a little bit from heroin because it hasn't blown up there like it has in other places. I've spent a lot of time out in Indiana, on the other side of Louisville, and I know that you know, I have friends. 7, I'm 40. I'm 40 now. I just saw your comment. But heroin got huge out there, you know, and you know, it's huge. We're just on the other side of the mountain in Kentucky. It's enormous. It never made it over. But what happened there, in the place I'm talking about, is they put everybody on Suboxone and Subutex, which then became the drug of choice on the street, was the Suboxone and the Subutex. So because they put everybody on that, the heroin didn't really come in. But what happens with those particular drugs, they only get you high for so long, and then your body builds up the tolerance in a short amount of time, and so it's just not enough. And so meth has gone it's exploded. And the quick note about meth, and this is, meth became the catalyst for me getting clean. It became the catalyst. Y'all, I was out for 20 years. I was around people using meth. I never did it. I was narcotics. I was a narcotic person. I did pain pills. That was my thing. I've tried plenty of other stuff. Cocaine. I've tried it all. Narcotics was my preference. But the last month that I was out there using, I was introduced to meth. Actually, it started in Indiana, if I'm honest about it. I'd gone out there for a trip to visited some friends that had kind of got into it, got introduced to it. It was insane. Blew my mind. It was crazy. It was whatever. It was terrible, honestly. But, and I swore then, no, I'm never going to do this insanity again. Go back to Virginia a month later, get kind of reintroduced to it. And in no time, it just took over. It took over, and it had me doing things that even in the 20 years of narcotic addiction, I never did, you know, and I was putting myself and my family and my kid in situations that I'm ashamed of. But it's just part of it. It's just part of it, and I can't beat myself up for that. All I can do is realize that that's what it was, you know, and it came to a point after a month of just sheer insanity and just horror, really, and just really bad stuff. And it led me to a point where one night I had to pick up the phone and I had to call my mom and tell her to come get my kid because something bad was going to happen. I didn't know if it was going to be an overdose, a death. I didn't know if it was going to be the cops. I didn't know if it was going to be me and this female killing each other because we were battling out because we'd been up for 5 days and we weren't thinking clearly, because that's the kind of insanity that ensues from meth. And meth is the devil, and just, I don't even know. It's scary. It's scary. And you don't need a prescription to get it. You can make it in a 2-liter bottle in the middle of nowhere and make it. You know what I mean? And that's a scary thing. That's a scary thing because it drives people crazy. It drove me crazy in 1 month. You know what I mean? And it was insane. But it led me to that place that I had to make that phone call. I had to pick up that phone that night, and that phone call changed everything. It changed everything. Hardest thing I've ever done in my life, best thing I've ever done in my life. Because it changed everything. And through a series of events after that, the universe has managed to shift pieces around and just put people and stuff in places that it needed to be for me to be in the place that I needed to be to become clear-headed. Now, as I became clear-headed, you know, that didn't free me of it, and that didn't insulate me from any future slip-ups and relapses. It required serious evaluation of things that I had to let go of, that I had been involved in and clung to for so long, that had become such an ingrained part of my life, that I had to let those things and those people go. And I'm not going to get too deep into it, and people that know me know what I'm alluding to here. I'm not going to get into this, because that's a whole other thing, and this is not the time or place for that. But it took a lot for me to, I struggled with it. I struggled with it a lot up until just very, very recently, within the last couple of months. Did I have something happen that triggered something in my brain that was like, you don't have to cling to this. You don't have to go back to this. It doesn't have to be that way. And it was a tremendous amount of hope. It was like a light turned on in my head, and I was able to take those things that I needed to really look at and be honest about for what they were. And as much hope and stuff as I had in those things, this just wasn't to be. And all it would serve is to just make me sick again. And I don't want to be sick again. I don't want to go out like that. I got too much to offer the world. I've got too much to offer to my kid. I'm raising the next generation of women here. You know what I mean? I'm raising the next generation woman. And that fucking matters. That matters. It's so important. And so I can't go out there again, you know? And props to the person that helped turn that light on for me. I'm not going to say your name here. Anybody that pays attention can probably pick up on it. It's not too hard. Turned a light on for me, and just, it changed everything. It changed everything. And I've now been able to take that thing, look at it, and start crossing that bridge, to just set it to the side, close that chapter. And that's what it is, you know. And apparently my phone is running out of storage, because I guess I've been ranting too long. So I'm going to wrap this up. I told you it was going to be a complete rant. I will talk about this again, because I can talk all day long about it. It's too important. I've got too much to say on it. Thanks anybody that listened, anybody that will listen. As this circulates, share it. If you know an addict, if you know somebody that, if there's anything you heard that can touch anybody you know, share it with them. Tag them in it. Something. It's too important. We have to come together as a society and tackle the epidemic of addiction. Our country needs it. Our kids need it. The world needs it. The world needs it. We have got to get our shit together in this country, because the entire planet depends on it. And we have to find those things that excuse me, that divide us, and we have to look at them, understand them, and just move past it already. Just move past it. We're all humans. I mean, we're all, before anything, we're just human beings. We're just all human beings. We all have vices. We all do say stupid stuff. We make mistakes. None of us are perfect. None of us are perfect. We're all just human, you know? And so I would just encourage you to just view everybody as human before you see anything. View them as human first. You know, I'm not saying discount, you know, people's ethnicity or cultures or backgrounds or religions or whatever. But before we're any of that stuff, before I'm white, before I'm a white man, I'm a human being. You know what I mean? Even the people they want us to hate, if for whatever reason, whether it be lies or whether it be truth, they're still just human. They're still just human. They love their families. They want the best for their kids too, just like any of the rest of us. And until we really start looking at each other like that, nothing is going to change. Nothing. The system has put too much time and effort into dividing us, and it is a huge mountain to climb. But we have to start somewhere. We have to start somewhere. And that's what it is. I'm going to end this because I said I was going to end it, and here I am ranting again. I love you all for who you are, and because you're human. Even the people I don't know, you probably have things I don't agree with, but you're still human. And I'm not going to bash you for any of those opinions or your disagreements with me or anything. I'm going to seek to understand where you're coming from, so we can find that bridge to cross, so that we can change the world. Change the world. We have to come together as one human race to change anything. To change anything. And addiction in this country is keeping so many people down, and keeping so many people from being able to open their eyes. It's keeping them asleep. It's helping keep people asleep, and that's what they want. And it's a vicious, vicious thing. It is hard to escape. Many, many, many people never make it. They never make it out. Good people that could have changed the world. They could have gone out and done so many things, but they get trapped in it and they can't escape it, and it kills them. They kill themselves. They waste away in a jail cell, or any number of things. Or things happen that just fuels it to where they're to the point of no return, and we can't let that continue. We just can't. We have to reach out to our fellow human beings that we see suffering or hurting, and say, what can we do? What can I do to help you? Offer a kind word, you know, just whatever you can do. The world needs it. Love the addict in your life. Don't hate them. Just seek to understand. Realize that the terrible things that they've done, it comes from somebody that's not them. The drugs have taken over. And that's just what it is. That's just what it is. Seek to love one another, and let's just change the world already. The country is too messed up. It's going to get more messed up as we move forward, and anybody that thinks that it isn't is lying to themselves. We have to help each other now, you know. and show people that there's a better way, that love can change the world. Love and support and understanding, not fear and hate and division, because it serves no purpose. It serves no purpose. With all that, I love you all. Be inspired, be fearless, change the world.